Hi, my name's Abrah Arneson, and I'm a clinical herbal therapist in practice in Ottawa, Canada, and also at my home in the beautiful Gatineau Hills. We're in my home right now. And yeah, I really am enamored and continuously fascinated by the relationship between plants and the human beings on all levels, from the joy of walking into a forest to the curiosity of finding a new plant and trying to discover how it works. Something like ghost pipe is such a strange plant. Um, and I have been practicing herbal medicine for almost 20 years now. And the deeper I dive into herbal medicine and its relationship to the human being and the human body and the body's relationship with plant medicine, the more I realize that there's a lot of different ways we can talk about the body and plants. And the more language I find to talk about the body and plants, the better my understanding of that profound relationship. So, blood is a big deal for herbalists, and plants tend to kind of understand blood. And herbalists of old talked about blood all the time. Even today, when we go enter into the biomedical model of herbal medicine, we get blood tests, and the blood tests tell us something about what's going on in our health in that moment. So let's talk about blood and how a herbalist can view blood and some of the plants that support blood. So let me just go to my PowerPoint. So blood, it's so beautiful and red. So blood. So to begin with, I think the first thing we have to talk about when we're talking about blood is the motionality of blood. And we have so many different associations with blood: hot-blooded, cold-blooded, boiling. My blood is boiling, when you have a client say, oh, my blood was boiling, you're going, oh, okay, maybe we need some nice cooling herbs here. Or someone says, oh, that made my blood run cold. They went into a kind of shock, like a shock. That would be a symptom of shock. Or to have blood on your hands, it's a bit of guilt, a bit of shame, perhaps, and that certainly affects your blood. Or to something that's too rich for your blood essentially means you can't really eat it or you can't take it in. It's not good for you. So there's all sorts of different ways we've talked about blood through the ages, and create these kind of expressions create an impression on our mind about blood. So you want to think, how would you describe your blood? What is your relationship to blood? And if you're working with patients, what is their relationship with blood? How do they describe their blood and the emotionality of blood? And the one thing that looking at all these different expressions brings to mind for me is the elements, such as blood is thicker than water, hot-blooded, cold-blooded, boiling blood. And the elements are all present in the blood. So when I talk about the elements in this context, I'm talking about water, fire, wind, and earth. And the elements are always, for me, a basic consideration when I'm looking at someone's health and the imbalances within their bodies. And the first thing I look at is, what are the balance of the elements? And every tradition of herbal medicine on this planet has used the elements in some way, in some form. They use different types of elements. Like in traditional Chinese medicine, there's earth, water, fire, metal, and wood. But still variations on the elements. And I do believe that a deep study of the elements is essential to really understand herbal medicine. So we're going to talk about the elements. That's where we begin, always. So obviously there's water in blood. Drink lots of water. Your blood will be better if you drink lots of water. Obviously there's water in blood. There's fire in blood. There's earth, minerals, the iron in blood. It's essential. It's one of the main things blood does is deliver oxygen, which attaches to iron molecule in the red blood cells. And there's air in the blood, and the air is the movement of the blood, the flow of the blood. So the first thing you really want to think about when you're studying blood and the flow of blood and the composition of blood is you want to think about like watersheds and study watersheds. Like go canoeing in a river, watch how the river moves through the landscape, watch the river in the spring, watch the river in the winter, watch the river in the fall, in the middle of the summer. I'm very fortunate. I live in a place we have a small lake that I swim in. I visited almost every day this lake. Today is the first day there was snow, and I went down to the lake this morning, and the changing in temperature, there was a mist rising off the lake. It was very beautiful. So I study how the water flows, and in the spring there's flooding in the lake, and the water runs down the hills as the snow melts. Study this. It seems a bit abstract. How does this relate to blood? It directly relates to blood. You'll learn so much by watching watersheds about blood, blood flow, blood composition, and also how to balance out blood. Excuse me. So here's a few different ways water is moving through the landscape. And you could think of these as all different ways the blood flows through the body. Here we have very quiet, flowing blood, very calm. Here in this one, it's a little more turbulent. This one might be a little more, this looks like it's hotter. It looks a bit tropical to me. Warmer blood. This would be colder blood. Look at the landscape and watch how blood moves through the landscape. And the first thing when you're thinking about blood is not so much about what the blood contains, such as hormones, microbes, nutrients, gases, etc., all the things that are measured in blood tests, but how is the blood moving through the body? This is the first consideration always. The blood moves through about 18 to 22 liters of blood flows through a network of veins, arteries, and capillaries that are about 60,000 miles long. This is twice the circumference of the earth. And how does it do this? And that movement, by the way, is the wind element. So how does blood move through your body? So you're probably thinking, the heart. Wrong. The heart isn't a pump. The heart is a really complex organ. It's totally tied into our nervous system. It's tied into our emotionality. It's tied into our endocrine system. It has its own electrical currents. It's a complex organ. I'm not going to get into the heart too much here. All I want to say is that basically it doesn't have the force to move the blood along. So you might be thinking, yeah, well, the arteries all have those muscles and they help move the blood along. And that's true. And the pump definitely supports, but there's another component to the movement of the blood through your blood vessels. And this is like super neato. Blood spirals through blood vessels. So we're into sacred geometry here. And the sacred spiral. So our spiraling universes, our spiraling lizard tails, our spiraling sunflowers, pine cones, these little, don't you love when vines put out these little tentacles to grab hold of fences or other branches, and of course the snail, and many other spirals. So the spiral is how your blood moves through your blood vessels. And it actually moves through your blood vessels in two streams, spiraling around each other. And this spiraling action creates a vacuum. It's very much like DNA. It spirals in the same way as DNA. And this is also why this spiraling motion, when something happens to a blood vessel, like maybe a plaque buildup or maybe some kind of infecting organism moves into the blood, it disrupts that spiraling. And that's where you get things like blood clots or thickening of blood, things like that. So, for example, something that people don't talk about a lot in blood clotting is that infectious disease can actually cause blood clots, because if there's a bacteria such as Borealis burgifolia, the bacteria commonly associated with Lyme, it can disrupt that spiraling flow through the blood vessels for various reasons, but this is not a Lyme talk, a Lyme's disease talk. This is about blood. It can disrupt that spiraling flow, and the result is blood clots. The blood kind of goes, whoa! It's kind of like you're driving along on the highway, and all of a sudden someone cuts you off, and it's all like, oh, or you hit a sheet of ice, and you're going, whoa, and you're off course, and that can happen within the blood vessel. But basically, what happens is the spiraling creates a vortex, a lot like a tornado, and it sucks everything along. The blood vessels are blood is moving through the blood vessels basically through suction, just like a tornado. So again, we're returning to this idea of the wind element and the spiral, and you can think of like in the autumn when the wind blows the leaves and they spiral, or when they're falling, they spiral through the air. Yeah. Also, trees spiral up. Trees are also a spiral, but that's another story. Okay, let's keep going. And just this spinning motion. Oh, sorry, this is my pussycat. She's a bit upset about the first day of snow. In any case, blood vessels spin as well through this spiraling. So there's all this motion going on in blood. It's really interesting. And then there's one more spiral where they have discovered that the heart itself is a spiral. So when they unwrap the heart muscle, they find that it's basically one long muscle, as here, that is wrapped within itself, and it forms a spiral. And that's how the different ventricles and atriums are formed, is through a spiral. This picture shows it quite well. And there's this really, really beautiful post. It's just a post, but she has many references to the spirals within the body, and on a sacred geometry page. So you might want to just look this up and take a look at it, because it's pretty interesting stuff. Fascinating. I love, one of the things about working with health and wellness and plants and the body is you're always looking for patterns. And so the sacred geometry, not that that's going to inform the medicine you're choosing, but the patternings in life are really important to watch when you're studying plant medicine, or you're studying how to support someone in their health with plant medicine. Patterns, it's about pattern recognition. You're looking for patterns of health. So there's a number of plants that we call circulatory stimulants. And these plants are really important because they support the movement of blood through the blood vessels. And if the blood is not moving well through the blood vessels, so if someone's really cold all the time, or say they have areas of trapped heat, so they might have like pockets of pain or one really sharp pain, or they might have inflammatory processes that are not moving to resolution. Though that's all, like the blood needs to move. You need to move the blood. So there's a number of herbs that really support the movement of blood. Prickly ash, Xanthoxylum americanum. Someone actually just brought me a bunch of prickly ash branches to make a fresh plant tincture with. South of where I live, there's like an overgrowth of prickly ash. It was really interesting making the medicine. I haven't pressed the tincture yet, but this plant is for me invaluable. I also think about it in relationship to echinacea. It has the same sensations in the mouth, that tingling feeling in the mouth. And this plant is so I also think of it as a lymphatic plant. Many people think of this plant as an anodyne, a plant that supports pain. Herbalists traditionally talk about pain as stagnant, including stagnant blood. And if you think about inflammation that's not resolving, there is a stagnancy in the blood. Like, why is that blood not moving on? You know, why is that inflammation not resolving? So you move blood. And once you move the blood, the idea is the pain resolves. Prickly ash, not necessarily the most pleasant herb to take, but it sure does work. And it's very specific for me when the hands and feet are cold. So if someone tells me they have cold hands and feet all the time, I choose prickly ash. Cayenne is not a herb I use a lot. What I usually will do is I'll recommend people put a little cayenne pepper in their cooking, and that's how I usually recommend people use cayenne. Cayenne is super hot, brings a lot of heat. So, I'm a Celt. My ancestors lived on like probably potatoes and bread. That's probably what they lived on for the most part. Maybe the odd bit of seafood or something like that. But anyways, so my body is not crazy about super spicy food like cayenne pepper. I love spicy food, but not crazy super. So, one of my East Indian friends will take me out for a meal and insist on ordering for me. And before I know it, like my eyes are running, my nose is running, I'm salivating. So that hot taste, that that pungency in cayenne, that actually triggers an immune response in the mouth. And what happens with the immune response is it's like, it's saying there's a burn going on. We need to cool that area off. And we know cool water cools off burns. And and the fire gets all the water moving in the body. So this is a really powerful herb to move stagnant water in the body. You just want to think about like biting a cayenne pepper and all the water that starts moving. It's to cool the heat. So, you can use a pinch of this herb. If there's a lot of heat, sometimes you can just push the body a little bit. This is more of a homeopathic application of cayenne, which you can try. Be very careful. But also, if someone's really cold, just a touch of cayenne really helps. And the other place where I think cayenne is really useful is if someone goes into shock and you need to break them out of shock really quickly, give them a dropper of cayenne. It's, not the best. Get ready to give them some yogurt or something like that, but it will help relieve the shock. Cayenne, circulatory stimulant. In Bartram's Herbal, it's a herbal. I love Bartram's Herbal. It's an older herbal. I love it. There's this story of this herbalist that is called into this woman who's laying on, on her deathbed, and all these folks are standing around, these experts standing around going, oh, we don't know what to do. Well, I think she's going to die. Anyways, the herbalist comes in and gives her like 5 droppers of cayenne tincture, and she sputters awake and lives for the next 5 years or something like that. Anyways, so think of cayenne as like really an aggressive plant that wakes everything up, including the immune system, but low dose. Great in food. Ginger is another really nice circulatory stimulant. Surprisingly, I don't use a lot of ginger in my apothecary. I do usually recommend it in cooking. People cook more with ginger or put a little ginger in their tea, fresh ginger in their tea. Fresh ginger tends to be more gentle than a dry ginger. So depending on how you're making your tincture, check it out, see how hot it is. Ginger, I think of primarily for circulation in the abdomen and pelvis, improving circulation in the abdomen and pelvis. So menstrual cramps would be a sign of a sluggish circulation in the pelvis. So you would use ginger to help relieve the cramps, of course, or a lot of bloating and gas. Ginger again to relieve that congestion, that stagnation, and also in the chest for chest colds and such as etc etc. And also if someone's just cold, ginger, I think in the kidney video we talked about ginger poultices on the kidneys to warm up the kidneys. The kidneys are a big part of the circulatory system, so ginger is another circulatory stimulant herb that is invaluable. And rosemary. I love rosemary. Yeah, and I'm thinking I have to go outside and dig up my rosemary plants and bring them in if it snowed today, but we'll get there. So rosemary is really specifically for when there's coldness in the head. What does that look like? Coldness in the head. In iridology, what you would be seeing is a little white kind of film forming over the top of the iris. That would be one thing you would look for. That would be an indication for rosemary, coldness in the head. You know, weak memory, hard time thinking. If there's a headache and it's relieved by heat, you might consider some rosemary. Yeah, rosemary is a really nice herb. I could say so much about rosemary. I'm just going to say rosemary to improve circulation in the head. Mind you, it's also a great carminative, so it can improve the movement of the gut. It's also, you definitely could use it in the respiratory tract. So don't think you just use this plant for the head. The other thing that's interesting about these plants is the brain has its own microbiome, and for a long time it was like things didn't cross the blood-brain barrier, but as a matter of fact lots of stuff crosses the blood-brain barrier, and some of the volatile oils that you would find in rosemary also cross the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, if you have some kind of microbiome imbalance in the brain, which they're now looking at, a lot of Alzheimer's and different types of dementia is caused by an imbalance in the microbiome in the brain. Sometimes they're saying it's a virus, sometimes it's bacterial. Rosemary, that might be why traditionally people have used rosemary, is because those volatile oils which support a balanced microbiome cross the blood-brain barrier. As with time's another one. Okay, so just a quick review. Circulatory stimulants, rosemary for the head. Cayenne really is a big heart circulatory stimulant. Ginger for the abdomen and the respiratory tract, and then prickly ash, hands and feet. You know, this is like a kind of a, yeah, you can work it this way, but you'll also improve circulation probably throughout the body using all these herbs. So if you don't have one of these, you could always substitute the next best one. And I should have added Angelica into here. Angelica, I always think, is for my core, when the core is cold, or there's a, like, yeah, when the core of a human being is cold, Angelica will warm it up. Angelica is a beautiful herb. So, just looking at this, let's go back to how water's moving through, or how the blood is moving through the blood vessels. So this would be, as an example, if you look at this, we might describe this blood as thin and cool. In this situation, you might be using something like prickly ash, or you might decide, oh, let's use a little bit of ginger, warm things up, relax things. And then you'll also want to use some nutrient-rich herbs to thicken up the blood, enrich the blood. So a blood like this water would be cool and thin. And we're gonna like explore this a little further later on in this video with the pulses. So think about, like, how would this water feel under your fingers if you were feeling a blood vessel. Oh, right. I chose burdock root for this kind of blood flow. Burdock root is an amazing plant, one of those really complicated everyday plants. And burdock root obviously is really high in minerals, so nourishes the blood, nourishes the body. High in fats as well, so supports, again, that deep nourishment of the body. It does have a bitterness to it, and the bitter tends to enhance the wind element in the body. Bitter taste is associated with the air element. However, it's also, if you harvest your roots in the fall, this is a great time to harvest burdock. You get sweet roots because the plants have been storing their sugars, and that sweetness is very nourishing, building for the body. So this would be a very sluggish, slow-moving, thick blood moving through the blood vessels. And notice how, like, you can easily see how it's not, this could flood and overwhelm the earth element. So which is out of TCM, where water overcomes earth. Earth is the container for water. And you can see how it's contained, but it could easily overflow. It's not super strong container. So think about how this kind of blood would feel under your fingers if you were feeling a pulse, and how you would want to increase the flow of this blood. This kind of, like, if your blood is slow and thick, you want to be thinking also about how is it carrying oxygen and nutrients to the rest of the body. And that's the blood's role, is to carry oxygen and nutrients to the body, and as well as remove waste. And so the tissues aren't as well oxygenated. Toxins aren't carried away as efficiently, and nutrients aren't delivered in an efficient manner either. So this is a very inefficient blood flow. So I chose good old nettles. And one of the things, one of the ways I think about nettles is for the couch potato. And this is kind of like couch potato blood, like, spent too much time sitting on the couch, eating potato chips, watching Netflix. And nettles really gets things moving. Nettles has it's a plant with a lot of energy, and it will help clean up that blood, get things moving. Yeah, couch potato blood. And then this is another kind of blood, and think of this as a kind of blood flow. And what's happening here is the earth element is saturated, so the rest of the body is saturated. The blood vessels are too porous and leaky. And so imagine walking through this landscape, and you have your rubber boots on, and you would be going swish, 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 maybe even getting stuck in the mud as you walk through this bog. So these would be boggy tissues. And this is a very slow blood flow with porous blood vessels. And you really need to do something about this. This is a really not a great state. You'll see lots of puffiness throughout the body. There's probably pain throughout the body. Yeah, so you need to get the blood moving in a better way and improve the blood vessels. And I didn't, and I should have put down Japanese knotweed would be a classic herb here to use for blood vessel integrity. Japanese knotweed is an extremely drying herb. You got to remember that when you're using Japanese knotweed, because you don't want to give it to dry people. But when someone's really wet and boggy and the blood vessels are losing integrity, Japanese knotweed is great for tightening up all those junctions or those gaps in blood vessels, and it just knits the blood vessel back together. So that would be one herb I would use there. Another herb that I would definitely be using in this situation is echinacea. You know, I love echinacea. It's worked so hard for herbalists in so many ways. It's such a vast, rich plant. The other day, someone was telling me how they use it for sprained ankles and to enhance ligaments and tendons. And I thought, well, I've never used it that way. So now I have to think about, now why is that? But in any case, here you have this breakdown of connective tissue. And one of the ways you can think about echinacea is it really supports the health and strength of connective tissue. So echinacea is great here. Echinacea is also a lymphatic, and the lymph system's job is to help clean up a boggy interstitial fluid. So when I talk about interstitial fluid, what I'm talking about is the leaking into the sort of soil of the body, out of the blood vessels and into the rest of the body. The rest of the body is also, mostly fluid, but it's not flowing well. And echinacea will help the flow of the interstitial tissue into the lymphatic system. Yeah, echinacea is such an interesting plant. I only use Echinacea augustifolia and I only use roots, but I grow my plants. If you can get yourself like maybe 6 or 7 Echinacea augustifolia plants, give it its own little patch. It will start self-seeding for you, depending on where you live, obviously. And then before you know it, you'll be able to harvest enough, like after about 3 years. Remember, herbal medicine is the medicine of patience. After about 3 years, you can start harvesting roots and making your own. Extremely satisfying, especially when the medicine you grew and made helps another human being. It's extremely satisfying. And cleavers, this is definitely a place for cleavers. Cleavers really helps create good flow within the interstitial tissue, supports the lymph system in being able to pick up the excess fluid in a boggy situation. So I'm going to talk more about cleavers when we get into the lymphatic system. Yeah, so watch for that video. Oh, this blood, I always just want to go right past this slide because it's so disgusting. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what we were just looking at would be something like what herbalists would call dirty blood. That would be an expression that old time herbalists use. It's fallen out of favor because obviously, if you had dirt in your blood, you would be dead. The blood has a very specific balance, but this would be blood that's carrying a lot of toxins. And toxins aren't necessarily like, Lysol and asbestos and, diesel fumes, those toxins. Mostly the toxins that your body creates just through living. So bits and pieces of dead cells, bits and pieces of dead bacteria and viruses, and the fags and all those characters, bits and pieces of dead things from your body. So Oregon grape is one of my favorite plants for cleaning up blood. I really love this plant. Um, I use the roots. It's high in berberine, so it really helps do some weeding in the bowel, but it will also help do some weeding in the mucous membrane of the respiratory tract. It has some liver action going on. It's a bitter herb, so it supports the liver in clearing in its processing and clearing activities. Um, I think of Oregon grape as a lymphatic as well. So again, we're cleaning up the interstitial fluid. It's a really important plant. Basically, when you have a situation with blood like this, what you really want to do is open up detoxification pathways in the body. And the detoxification pathways are like the liver, the colon, the kidney, the bladder, and the lymphatic system. And this plant, I find, is pretty universal. It will help all the detoxification pathways. Maybe not so much kidney, but definitely lymph and liver and colon. And black walnut is a great plant too here. Black walnut, I think, is like a systemic antimicrobial, which I'm 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 anti language in herbal medicine using terms like antimicrobial, because really what happens is the plants are more biome balancers. They have coexisted with microbes on this planet longer than they've coexisted with human beings, and these plants that have the ability to work in a really powerful way with microbes, I think of them as more balancing. So this would be definitely a plant that I would use in a situation where I felt like the blood was really sluggish, really thick. They might have dark circles under their eyes. They would definitely be complaining about fatigue, quite possibly systemic pain, um, quite possibly a low thyroid, some kind of endocrine imbalance, maybe a blood sugar imbalance too, maybe wounds that aren't healing. Yeah, it would be a situation where you want to go in and really support the microbiome of the body, but also support all the tissues, the pathways of elimination. And black walnut is a great plant. Complex, another one of these complex plants. So these plants are all called alteratives. And alteratives at one point were called blood cleansers. We don't call them blood cleansers really anymore, or blood purifiers. They were called blood purifiers. Talking about pure is a very tricky word. I kind of always go, oh, I don't know about that word in relationship to medicine. It historically, it has some pretty significant racist connotations. So I avoid that word. I love the word alternative. It's a really weird word. Spell check still hasn't figured out that I like to use that word when in my writing. It appeared in the 1500s to describe plant medicine, and is made of two parts, alt and ativ. And alt basically means to nourish. That's what that word means. And then ativ, the piece ativ, means to tend to. So this is an alternative, means I tend to nourish you. And one of the things that's really important to think about with blood is like, this blood is not well nourished. 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 This is all ways that the blood flows that is not able to deliver the oxygen and nutrients to the tissues in a good way. So alternatives return the ability for the blood to nourish the body. and mind. Okay, next you have to think about the fire element in the blood. So we've thought about the air element, how the blood is moving and how we can get the blood moving better in the body. The next we have to think about the fire element. So, hot-blooded, whoa, this would be a crazy movie to see. But anyways, hot blood, cold blood. What do you have? Hot blood, cold blood? And the relationship between blood and fire and water is really key here. One of the things about the water element in the body is they say the water element holds the fire element, contains the fire element. It's just like today down at the little lake, right? The vapors were rising off the lake because the air was colder than the lake, and so it was steaming up into the air. So there's this relationship. Some people go, oh no, the fire element and the water element don't get together. And I say, oh yeah, try swimming in the lake in July and tell me that those two don't go together nicely, So it's about a dynamic relationship between the water and the fire element, and we see that in the blood. Oops. Okay. This image here, this pot with the steam coming up, reminds me of an expression from TCM called liver heat rising. It's like the steam. And remember, heat likes to rise. And when the fire element, when there's too much fire element in the blood, it tends to rise. Heat rises. Okay, that's an important thing to remember. So to cool the blood, you might have to cool off the fire in the blood. What would a lot of fire in the blood look like? Like the blood might be going really quickly, or it might be really superficial pulse. You might have a really superficial pulse. You might see redness on the face. You might see acne on the face. You might have headaches, especially on the right side, headaches, again, pain, a systemic inflammation that's not resolving, maybe really weak digestion, too much fire, dryness, a sense of dryness. Okay, so hands down, the best way to cool off the blood is with flavonoids. And flavonoids are a big class of plant constituents. You're going to find flavonoids in all the fruits and vegetables you eat. Plants make flavonoids to control the fire element in their own tissues. So one of the reasons why plants make flavonoids is to protect them from the sun's radiation. So too much heat from the sun that burns them. It's like when I take my house plants outside in the spring, some of them go, oh my God, this is too much sun for me, and then they get their flavonoids going and they can sustain themselves in the sun, direct sunlight. Anyways, my favorite plant for this would be Schisandra berries. It's an amazing plant for cooling off hot blood. Okay, now where are we at? We're at the Tree of Life. Don't you love this piece of art? I love the little birds in it and the little flowers, but then it's also kind of gruesome. So blood and life, the Tree of Life. And I just want to do a shout out to this book by Phyllis Light, Southern Folk Medicine. This book really helped me understand the role of blood in herbal medicine with a lot more clarity. This is a really fun book to read for a herbalist. It's a very informative book. She is a herbalist that's rich with both a science background and a folk herbalist background. And this book really helped me understand blood. So, and how she talks about blood is she talks about it similar to how sap flows through a tree. And that and just as sap nourishes all the leaves, that's the role of blood. It's to nourish the life in the body. That's the role of blood. And so it brings things up from the earth, and that when it's coming up from the earth, that sap is thick and rich, so doesn't take a lot of imagination. Where I live, we in the spring we have we make maple syrup, and it's so much fun to do. You tap your trees and you go out every day and check the sap, and as the earth as things get warmer, the sap gets thicker, and then you put it on the fire and you really thicken it up to make syrup. Yeah, and you sit around the fire all day drinking tea. It's wonderful. But anyways, so yeah, so how the sap is flowing through the tree depends on temperature. So in the winter, it's stored down in the roots and it's thick. As warmth comes, the sap thins out and begins to move throughout the tree. And so that's one of the ways you assess blood, is by thinking about how it moves through a tree. So this would be very thick blood, and you see it can't get through the tree to nourish it. And there it is, springtime. We're just on the cusp of winter here where I am, so I always look forward to spring. Okay, so now let's get into a little bit of physiology out of this kind of like abstract, intuitive understanding of herbal medicine. So the arterial system is different than the venous system. So the arterial system is the part of your blood vessels that deliver blood. And so they're taking blood into the capillary beds, and then your venous circulatory system, your veins, basically, what they're doing is they're returning non-oxygenated blood to the heart. Okay, other than in the liver, there's a third circulatory system in the liver, and I talked about that in the liver video. So just the arteries are taking oxygenated blood to the body, to the cells, and the veins are taking blood rich in carbon dioxide to the lungs to be exhaled, and then to the heart to be oxygenated again. Okay, well, the lungs, and then to the heart to be pumped out into the circulatory system, or put into their spiral, one could say. Okay, so what do I want to say? Oh, right. The veins, they don't really have blood vessels. That's why when you touch it, or they don't have muscles in their linings. They're blood vessels with no muscles. So when you touch a vein, so on your wrist, you're going to see these blue blood vessels. That's a vein, and you can't feel a pulse in them because they have no muscles. Doesn't mean the blood isn't flowing. It just means there's no muscles helping to push it along like this. Arteries, that's where you're going to feel your pulses, and they have muscles. So we have herbs that act on the muscles of blood vessels. And these herbs are called diaphoretics. And what diaphoretics do is they relax the muscles in the arteries. So if there's a lot of tension in a blood vessel, in an artery, or you're going to feel tension in that flow. And often that equates with high blood pressure, tension. So you use plants that are diaphoretics, which open up, relax the blood vessels. There are lots of diaphoretics in herbal medicine. Most of them also calm the mind and calm the heart, if you think of the heart like a big blood vessel. Okay, so these are calming herbs. They open up blood vessels and support the delivery of blood to the periphery of the body. These plants are really important to use to help move heat from the core of the body to the surface of the body. So these herbs are traditionally used to help manage fever, that the core of the body doesn't get overheated. the blood, the water element in the blood will take the heat to the surface of the body and come out as sweat. So when we sweat, that's like removing the heat from the core of the body. We don't want to overheat. And diaphoretics will do this. They'll open up the blood vessels to allow the heat to move out of the core of the body. And at the same time, if you can put some heat into the body and use a diaphoretic to help the heat flow through the body, you can warm someone up with a diaphoretic as well. So I love linden flower. It's one of my favorite diaphoretics. It's also very healing to the arterial walls. It's considered demulcent. So if you make yourself some linden tea, which is delicious and lovely to have in the evening, it helps you sleep. And you put it in the fridge overnight. When you take it out, you're going to have that thickness from the sugars of the flowers and the leaf. And it creates a demulcent effect. It will be like thick and a little gooey. And David Hoffman, UK herbalist in the United States, says that this plant is a demulcent for the blood vessels. So if there's been a lot of heat and a lot of tension within the arterial system, you want to use a plant like linden flower to cool the blood, very high in flavonoids, and relax the blood vessels and heal that lining. Linden flower. In my area, they're also called basswood. It's a wild tree here called basswood. Sage is another diaphoretic. Sage is a really complicated plant, another one of these like everyday plants that are super complicated. Sage is interesting because it will also stop sweating. If you drink it cold, it closes. I don't know exactly how it does this, but in some ways it closes sweat glands. So, when women are in the stage of life where they might be having sweats, they use this tea cold to help reduce the sweating. However, a tea that's hot of this will have a diaphoretic and help move the heat out to the surface of the body, relax the blood vessels. So these plants are all used in high blood pressure. Low blood pressure, which is an issue. I see a lot of people with low blood pressure, particularly women. And if you think about low blood pressure, that means that there's a lack of delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the cells of the body and a removal of waste. So low blood pressure often means that there's a low energy and quite possibly like some brain fog or like not making the connections super quick. Low blood pressure, I think, is an issue. I see a lot of people with it, and more people with low blood pressure than high blood pressure. And I really think we need to support people with low blood pressure. So nettles is your classic herb to increase low blood pressure. A lot of people talk about, again, nettles like really high in iron, high in nutrients. And also low blood pressure tends to not, it tends to pool a little bit. It doesn't like flow in that spiral in a good way. And nettles really helps pick up the speed of the pulse and boom, like strengthen it, strengthen the blood. And if you look here, you can see that nettles is growing in a spiral. A lot of people talk about licorice for low blood pressure, or that licorice can cause high blood pressure. In all my years of practice, I have never seen licorice cause high blood pressure. I have used it in situations where people have low blood pressure. Does it increase the blood pressure? I don't know if it's as good as nettles. Would nettles increase high blood pressure? I don't think so. I've never seen that either. But I think licorice is not a well understood plant. It's a really complicated plant. It has a lot of different types of actions in the body. Uh, I don't want to go down a licorice rabbit hole here. I just want to say that how you prepare a plant depends, affects how the medicine of that plant acts in the body. So the amount of alcohol you're using in your tinctures, or if you're doing a tea with licorice, you're going to be getting different medicine. The other thing that you want to think about is licorice is traditionally not a high dose plant. So you would not be just drinking licorice straight tea. Licorice would be a small amount to flavor the tea. You wouldn't be drinking just straight up licorice tea 3 or 4 times a day. Licorice is a supporting herb. Licorice isn't a leading herb. So in formulation, you have herbs that support and herbs that lead. So for example, a plant like let's see, a Schizandra, right, might be a leading plant. It cools the blood. It works on the mitochondria of the body. It has this big systemic effect on the body. So does licorice, but licorice is a really powerful herb, and you only need a little bit for its medicine to be effective. If you take too much of it, you're going to have problems. So I think it's actually the high blood pressure question with licorice is a question of dose and not using the plant in a way that it's been traditionally used. So there you go, my licorice rant. Okay, I just want to suggest this one idea before we move on to the pulsing muscles of the arterial bed and pressure, and how that pressure wave affects. So I want you to think about each of these spots as like a blood vessel moving through tissue. And our tissues are all like cells floating in water, only there's different densities of cells. For example, our lungs have a very porous density. It's a very thin tissue, whereas our liver is much thicker, or bone is very thick and hard. So as the arteries float, pulse through these different tissues, they create different types of pressure waves through the tissue. And there's this constant movement of the water through the body and different pulsations through different organs. And this gets in the apprenticeship I run, we work on this when we're working with pulse. This is what we're thinking about when we're working with pulse. But I just want you to think about that there's this ongoing massage of all the fluid is always in motion in the body. And that's really important for health. Very important for health. When the fluid is not moving, that creates ill health. So let's do a little historical ideas about blood. The life of flesh is in the blood. So if the blood is not well, the flesh is not well. Medusa, one of my favorite characters from Greek mythology, so misunderstood. But anyways, we're not going to go into Medusa and Greek mythology and how she was so misunderstood and what were these guys doing running around cutting off her head? Anyways, Medusa had 2 different types of blood. On her right side, she had life-giving blood, and on her left side, she delivered poison. And isn't that kind of like how medicine goes? You know, medicine can quickly become poison. And medicine is also very life-giving. And that blood, the blood of life, you know. Yeah, Medusa, super interesting myth. Highly recommend studying it. The alchemists had a really interesting idea about blood, and blood contains air, which when distilled could treat epilepsy and migraines. So in other words, they saw that epilepsy and migraines, which I sometimes wonder if they're not like sort of twin conditions, migraines and epilepsy. Definitely wonder that sometimes. Is an air element imbalance in the blood. Water is a tonic for the heart and neurological issues. So a lot of now is not epilepsy and migraines a neurological issue? I don't know. Maybe they're a blood issue, right? Because there's not a lot of really great success at curing epilepsy or migraines. So maybe we're thinking about them in not quite the right way. Anyways, yeah, water. So in a lot of neurological issues, there's an excess of tension. And in cardiac issues, there's an excess in tension in the body. And water softens. Tension creates hardness, and water softens. So if you think about, like, at going where there's been water running and how it just wears away the stone, it softens the stone. Or an opal is a water drop that's hardened, but they're so fragile. People hate to work on an opal because they crack so easily. And most potent of all is fire, which can revive a person in their hour of death. And so that's what that story is in Bartram's Herbal about the woman who was given cayenne. Blood was also held to be an aphrodisiac, and alchemists prepared extracts of it, promising patients that make the old age lusty and to continue in a state for a long time. So anyways, giving blood to old people makes them lusty, which I don't know, is that a good thing? Anyways, or are they talking about a vitality? Are they talking about renewing a vitality? And this is just a really bad translation, because blood is vitality. Your blood is profoundly influenced by hormones. And I consider the endocrine system to be like the cycling mind. Remember, the endocrine system, that is the system of glands that releases hormones and communicates to all the tissues of our body with hormones. It's a communication system our body uses. And they're glands. And there's more than just these glands, but these are the glands that we often talk about. Fat, for example, are endocrine glands. Fat cells are endocrine glands. Okay, so estrogen tends to thicken the plant. So you might thicken blood. So you might be using things more mineral-rich plants. Adrenaline narrows arteries. So plants that are diaphoretic. So you might go to linden or elderflower is another really lovely diaphoretic that eases tension out of the mind body. Hawthorn leaf and flower, another diaphoretic that eases tension out of the mind body, relaxes the blood vessels, creates warmth. Also, hawthorn leaf and flower are really rich in flavonoids, so cools hot blood again. So adrenaline, too much adrenaline creates too much heat in the body, so cool off the body with the flavonoids. Low thyroid hormone levels were suggested to be sluggish or bad blood. And there you're going to use your alternatives. So like black walnut, burdock, cleavers, plants like that. Maybe even Oregon grape. So yeah, when there's endocrine imbalances, because it's going to affect the blood. Black cohosh. Oh, I love this plant so much. This is one of my favorite plants. Yeah, so why do I have black cohosh here, right? As a in the blood formula. In the blood, isn't it more like endocrine system, like menopause? That's the big selling point for this plant. Most of the research is on menopause. Is menopause a problem with hot blood or cool blood? One has to consider that with the changing temperatures, the insomnia, there's often liver heat with menopause, but that's all besides the point. We're not going down the menopause or perimenopause path today. Black cohosh is an alternative, and it is a beautiful anodyne. In other words, it helps relieve pain in the body. And I use it mostly when there's pelvic congestion. So the blood is congested in the pelvis. So this might be, what would that look like? Well, that might be something like endometriosis or really clotty periods or fibroids. But it also might look like something like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or like a really repeated urinary tract infections, even a boggy, a swollen prostate hypertrophy. So that would be like a boggy prostate. Any time where there's congestion, the blood is not flowing well in the pelvis, I choose black cohosh. It's a really important plant. I use it all the time. And again, I grow my own black cohosh. So get yourself 4 or 5 plants, maybe 7, let them grow for a few years, and then start picking them, replant the crowns, replant pieces of them in your yard, find the perfect place to grow it. And you'll always have black cohosh medicine, and you won't have to go out looking for it. It's a beautiful medicine to have, especially if you live where I live in the forests of the northeastern North America. Cortisol has a profound effect on the blood. And this is just touching the edge here. We're just touching the edge. But one of the things about cortisol is it increases blood sugar levels. So higher blood sugar levels or high cortisol levels, a lot of stress otherwise, right? Like the body really has to stay awake and keep working. Cortisol is an essential hormone. It's often demonized, but it's like it gets you out of bed in the morning. You know, without cortisol, you don't get out of bed in the morning, and you don't get to do all the fun things you do in your life. But if it's too high, it will cause a release of too much sugar into the blood vessels, and the sugar in blood vessels is not a good thing. Sugar is sharp. Especially that white sugar, which I consider poison. And it damages blood vessels. And we all know about, the eyes and the kidneys is really suffer, fingers and toes really suffer when there's high blood sugars. So that needs to be considered with blood. And often the blood will feel thick. And here you have a class of herbs called adaptogens. And if you look quickly, just review your adaptogens, and adaptogens support a balanced release of cortisol. And you want to remember that cortisol's partner hormone is melatonin. So you're working a day-night cycle with this piece of the moving mind, the endocrine system. Working with cortisol, it balances out the melatonin cortisol balance cycling in the body. Adaptogens do. So sorry, I didn't say that very well. The adaptogens help balance out the cycling melatonin cortisol levels in the body, which is the day-night cycle that human beings live and most of life on this planet live. And a quick research of these herbs, Eleutherococcus being one, Withania somnifera, ashwagandha being another one. One of my favorites is wild sarsaparilla, areala, notocoleus. That's the ginseng that grows in the forest where I live. Holy basil. What else? Bacopa, rhodiola. There's a lot of them. These all help moderate blood sugar levels. And so they support the health of the blood. You want to think when blood sugars are not in balance, the blood is not healthy. You have to protect your blood vessels. Again, a really great plant would be Japanese knotweed. Oh, let's talk about hormonal medicine. Hormonal medicine is all based on blood, in some ways. And I love that about hormonal medicine. So the sanguine type is the warm-blooded individual, and they're the fun ones. They're the ones you want to go out and have fun with. They have a lot of ideas. They're ruled by the air element, and their blood is warm. They have warmth. They offer warmth. And a really great plant for these guys, because they can get a little too social, would be hawthorn. It cools off the heat in their blood. They have fire in their blood, cools off the heat in their blood, and it cools off their mind, and it helps them relax. They can get a little overstimulated with all their fun times. So you want to take care of their good-hearted natured folks, that you need to care for that good heart with hawthorn. The caloric are the hot-blooded folks, and the hot-blooded folks are great for getting things done. Like this guy, he just like climbed this mountain so he could see the sunrise, And so the caloric are like, you've got a hard task. You need someone who can go through it, focus, and accomplish it. You want to find your caloric. They have hot blood. They are like ready for life. Some people say like they're combative and blah blah blah. Let's think of these people as these are the people who get things done. They don't stand around they don't stand around chatting, finding out how everybody is, like the sanguine. These guys are like, no, we got to get this done now. So the linden flower is a great plant here. Remember, we talked about linden flower being like a moistening demulcent for the blood vessels. So here we have a hot and dry person. So you want to cool off the blood with a cool, moistening plant like linden flower. Linden flower is also high in flavonoids. Remember, the flavonoids are key for cooling the blood. The melancholic. I love the melancholic. I actually think I'm essentially a melancholic. I love to be by myself, and I love just kind of thinking about things. And they have thin blood, and they're the philosophers. They look and they see. They see the world as a mirror. They see they study the world. They study life. They're the philosophers, and they tend to be somewhat internal, very internal, and they're cool and dry. They're not always so quick to respond. Like, if someone invites me to a party, I'm like, well, let me think about it, right? I'm not the sanguine type. And then, I'm not crazy goal oriented either. I like to do creative projects, but I don't necessarily see that I have to finish the creative project right away. I can't like meander with my projects. So alfalfa is a great plant here. It's very nourishing. It's moistening. It's not particularly warming, but it will nourish and moisten the blood. It will, it provides beautiful nourishment to the blood. It also has really deep roots, which is kind of like, I think of a mirror for the melancholic. The melancholic is also often like thought of like a depression, but I actually think the melancholic is a really important person in our world that isn't encouraged or supported that much. And then the phlegmatic. The phlegmatic tends to have thick blood, and I kind of picked this picture because you can kind of see here how her body's a little thicker, and they are water. They're ruled by the water element, so they have all that emotionality. They're very loving. They love their home. They love their family coming to their home and cooking for their family. And they're called cool and moist. So you would use something to keep that water element moving in their body, and cleavers might be a good choice there. Cleavers is drying. So here's just a little map. And I like this one because it kind of tells us a little bit more about these different types of people that you'll see in your herbal practice, and how to choose herbs for them according to their blood and their elemental balance, and not see them as a negative. I think it's really important to not always put everything in a negative, which tends to be what medicine does with anti-language, but that's all nonsense. So tastes. So how we taste things affect our blood. And you want to think like, okay, the blood is the delivery system of the nutrients. That's what it does. It delivers the nutrients to the rest of the cells of our body, all the cells of our body. So when we taste something, it affects our blood. Our blood is getting ready to deliver these nutrients or not deliver the nutrients. Okay. The tongue is a very wise chemist in our body, and it's always wise for a herbalist to study the tongue and the intelligence of the tongue. I might do a video one day on the tongue because it's definitely worth studying to really understand how to work as a herbalist. So the sweet taste thickens the blood. The blood gets thick with sweet. The salty taste slows blood down. Celery seed. So say you had someone with really rapid, thin blood, you would be thinking, let's slow this blood down. And you can use a salty herb like celery seed. Some people think nettles is also a salty herb. So these high mineral herbs you could also use. Slow the blood down. The salty taste is really unique in that it collects us back together. It slows us down. So if someone's going really speedy, try some salt. Bitter thins the blood. So if the blood's too thick, add some bitter. The bitter is associated with the wind element. Thick blood will often collect heat. The heat is one of the things about the water is the water moves the blood to the surface of the body. The blood cools off, and then the blood returns to the center of the body, the heart and the lungs and the liver, and it's warmed up again, and then it moves to the surface of the body where it cools off and then returns to the center of the body. So there's this kind of movement of heat, and when the blood is thick, it doesn't move as well, and it can build up heat, and you'll feel that in the pulse. You'll feel this like, oh, you as soon as you feel the pulse, you'll be like, oh, that is thick and hot. Like you'll feel the heat on the skin. And so you want to think, okay, I need a bitter herb here. I need some bitters. And our green vegetables are considered bitters, like all our salad vegetables. Romaine lettuce is considered mild bitter. Sour cools the blood. So that we're back to talking about flavonoids. The sour taste is flavonoids, cools the blood. So if someone's really hot, a lot of sweating, red on their face, maybe a little flary in their temperature, in their mood, they flare. Sour will help cool them off. And spicy warms the blood. So these are your carminatives. And here I have garlic and onions, which are I always cook with garlic and onions, but your carminative herbs. So these would be like cardamom and ginger and fennel and peppermint. These are your carminative herbs. They warm the blood. So if it's cold, you can give them a little bit of warmth. Okay. So those are the tastes. So this is an expression from traditional Chinese medicine, and I love this. Having received sufficient blood, the liver can support healthy eyesight. Having received sufficient blood, feet can walk. Having received sufficient blood, the palm can grasp hold of things. Having received sufficient blood, the fingers can pick things up. This illustrates blood's importance in healthy muscle movement and sensation. If blood is deficient, dizziness, vertigo, ringing in ears, tendinitis, or limb weakness can occur. So in traditional Chinese medicine, we have these two states, basic states called deficiency or excess. And I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. I'm a Western herbalist. I consider myself a Western herbalist. I do love some of the things about traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. And I think looking at if someone is deficient or excess is a really useful way of assessing blood. So let's look at it. Oops. There is no chat. You guys are on video. Okay. So this is a deficient state. The lips are pale, very thin, very that low affect, so not really a sense of, well, she feels quite sad to me, but there's not a lot of energy for exuberance or happiness or joy. Dark circles, you know, the hair isn't that the hair just is kind of like, yeah, she doesn't look well. She looks deficient, pale. So you need to build blood. You're building blood. And so here we would probably see a pulse that's quite thin, probably quite deep. There might be a heavy cycle or a history of a heavy cycle, or maybe there has been, she's just birthed a child and lost significant blood. So there's a deficiency of blood. So we need to build blood, because without that, she doesn't have the energy for life. And energy for life doesn't mean just being able to go out and have a good time. It also means that her immune system is working in a good way. So she's open. If that immune system doesn't have the resources it needs from the blood, you know, she's open to illness, deeper illness. So we need to build this person. So hibiscus is a really nice plant. I use a lot of hibiscus flower. Again, we've got the flavonoids, so they're protecting the blood vessels, but it's also high in iron. It's an iron-rich plant. And I would start with iron in this for this person. And also the flavonoids support the absorption of minerals in the small intestine. So I would definitely probably use some hibiscus. The problem with hibiscus is it's a cooling plant. So it's high in iron, but it's cooling, which wouldn't be great for her. But we can counterbalance that cooling action with other herbs. Nettles. We could balance out nettles with that, which carries a bit of heat and is a drying herb. And nettles is high in minerals and high in iron. So this is another blood building herb. We're going to build her up. And rosemary, which is a warming herb. So here I am going to counteract that cooling action of hibiscus and get her blood flowing. And because she looks like someone who's like needs more energy in her head, needs to be thinking more, needs more like I can respond to my life in a good way. Rosemary for memory, rosemary for the head, so circulatory system that way. I could have just as easily chosen prickly ash or ginger, but I chose rosemary. So that would be a nice little tea, hibiscus, hibiscus, nettle, and rosemary as a little tea for this person to drink, and it would help build her blood up. Also more protein. Oh, and then I added some linden, and linden is to relax her body and help her body receive the nutrients coming into her. So this would be a situation of excess. Now, just because we're saying this is a situation, these folks suffer with excess, it doesn't mean that they don't have ultimately a deficiency. There could be a very profound deficiency in what looks like excess. But first, there needs to be, the blood needs to be tended to. These folks probably have fairly thick blood. So, yeah, their blood would be thick and sluggish. So here we're going to be looking at more like alternative plants. Oh no, we're going to start with bitters. So bitters are really great because bitters will get the liver moving, they'll get the digestion moving, and bitters are cooling. I would imagine these folks are probably more hot and damp. They might have a cold in them, but they could be quite warm and damp. So the bitters will be drying as well. So bitters are important. Bitters also calm down the heart, so it pumps more efficiently. Bitters can lower blood pressure, so relaxes the tension in the blood vessels, slows down the movement of the heart, slows down the movement of the blood, which isn't necessarily what we want to see with these folks, but I would definitely begin with bitters. And then echinacea. These are some echinacea roots I harvested last week. And echinacea to start cleaning out that interstitial tissue and supporting lymph. So moving that excess fluid out of their body, using echinacea to do that. And ginger to warm them up from inside, warm up their digestion, warm up their lungs, and get things moving. And nettles. I'm going to use nettles in this situation as well, because I remember nettles for the couch potato, right? Nettles for the person who ate too many potato chips. Nettles is a really great plant, and underlying this, the situation of excess is probably a deficiency, and nettles is a great building plant. Okay, let's talk about what the blood contains. So the blood basically is made of plasma, which is like the fluid that carries everything, red blood cells and white blood cells. So plasma, drink water, so you have lots of plasma. So all your blood cells, so your white blood cells, and your platelets, their job is to thicken the blood, but also they are a big part of your healing system. So if there's a wound, the platelets jump in and help do some of the healing in the area. They all come out of the same stem cell that is made in your bone marrow. It lives in your bone marrow, your long bones. So your upper leg bone, your femur. Yeah, that's where a lot of blood is made, and in your sternum. So red blood cells, super cool. These things are so cool. They're like little flying saucers spinning through your blood. Oops, there goes my pussycat. Okay, when they're mature, so it takes about 2 days for a red blood cell to mature, they lose their nucleus and their mitochondria. So are they alive? That is the question. But they do live for about 120 days. So they're in circulation for about 120 days. And then they're eaten by white blood cells called macrophages. And the macrophages eat approximately 5 million every second. That's amazing. That means that your body's producing 5 million every second, which is outstanding. Just as we're sitting here, how many blood cells have died and how many red blood cells have been made. And they're shaped like this, concave, to be able to absorb oxygen. And they're also very like flexible, so that they can squeeze. They change shapes as they like little mice that change shapes as they go through cracks in your foundation. Or hopefully there's not too many cracks in the foundation. Anyways, so they can move through the capillary beds. They're a delivery system. So at the core of the red blood cell is iron, and it's called the HEM, the hemoglobin molecule. And it's what oxygen attaches to as that red blood cell moves through your body, delivering oxygen to all your cells, so your mitochondria can do its work to create energy so that you can have a life. And your liver can do what it does, and your immune system can do what it does, and your brain can do what it does, and your heart can do it. All that's run by the mitochondria, which is run by oxygen, which is delivered by red blood cells. So at the center of these red blood cells that have no nucleus or mitochondria is a hem molecule, which stores the iron. At the very center of our earth is an iron core, which I just find so interesting. And sometimes I just sit quietly. There goes my pussycat again. I just sit quietly and see if I can feel the iron core of the earth calling to the iron in my blood. And just that contemplation creates such a sense of grounded centeredness, that I am here and that I belong here. It's quite profound. So if you ever feel like you don't really belong here, or you're not centered and really scattered, kind of feel like you're flying off the face of the earth, consider the relationship between the iron in your blood and the iron core of the earth, and it will help ground you and make you feel like it's okay to be here on this amazing planet that supports life. So there's a number of plants that have iron. So as I've already said, hibiscus, nettles, and yellow dock, Rumix crispus, the root of this plant is also high in iron. There's a thing, some people get concerned about the oxalic acids in yellow dock. I don't get concerned. Oxalic acids it can interfere with absorption of minerals in the small intestine. However, I believe that we're only supposed to absorb so many minerals. Minerals are not something that we need in high amounts. I think it's a balancing system that the plant naturally offers us, the oxalic acid with iron-rich plants. And it's a form of protection so that we don't absorb too much iron. There is a genetic condition called hemochromatosis where the body just keeps absorbing iron and doesn't release any iron. And it's quite a serious condition. It results in quite a bit of heart disease and liver disease. So, yeah, that's what I believe. I don't know if it's correct or not, but that's where I'm at right now. Also, just aside, I saw something the other day, which like something like 50% of women in Canada are iron deficient, which means that they don't have the energy they need to do their life, and their organs certainly don't have the energy they need to do their life either. So if you're feeling tired, if you feel deficient, if you feel like you don't have your energy for your day, think about taking some iron-rich plants. And I've never had iron-rich plants constipate people, just as an aside. And then the white blood cells, and these guys are super interesting. I'm not going to go into great detail about the white blood cells because that's a whole nother video. But these guys are super interesting. So here they are. Here's this little critter, and here's the white blood cell coming up to get it, and here's the red blood cell. A lot of microbes like to penetrate the red blood cells because of the rich iron, and they're going for the iron. They need the iron for their own metabolism. So a lot of microbes will penetrate cells and destroy the cells to extract the minerals contained within the cells. So kind of like human beings do to the earth, But anyways, that's besides the point. So here's a white blood cell, and look at this little critter here. Yeah, these are platelets here being released to help create some clotting where there's a bleed. So the monocytes, which are carried in your blood, these are white blood cells, help break down bacteria. The lymphocytes, there's a number of different types of lymphocytes, and these are associated with your lymphatic system, so they travel through your lymphatic system, lymphocytes, and they're B cells and T cells. So your plasma cell is the one that makes the antibodies, and then you have your helper cell and your cytotoxic cell, and these are the cells. The T cells are mostly engaged with cancer, with rogue cells, or cells that look like they're lost the plot, one could say. And this is a neutrophil, and these are the most numerous white blood cells you have in your body. And look at it, it's amazing. This looks like it's a staff or something that it's going after. And it's just going to grab it and eat it. Yeah, this is what's going on inside you. It's a little bit sci-fi, eh? Some kind of weird outer space monster. And then the eosinophils, they're the ones who attack parasites and cancer cells, and also cause an allergic response. So here's eosinophils attacking a parasite. And astragalus is one of my most favorite plants ever for helping to build white blood cells or moderate white blood cells. Hold on one second. Someone is coming in. And astragalus is a blood builder. It's considered a blood building herb. One of the ways that I've found it extremely useful is to help people who have allergic reactions. So right before pollen season, I'll recommend that they begin to take astragalus root about 4 weeks before pollen season, and their immune system is much quieter than if they didn't take it. So their allergic reaction isn't as pronounced. And but it's also a plant that you might start taking in the autumn as a kind of like a herbal flu shot to get your immune system ready to meet the winter. So it's not necessarily a plant that you would take if you had an active infection, but it definitely wakes the immune system up, wakes up the white blood cells without creating an overactivity of the white blood cells. And reishi is very similar. It's an immune modulator, immune builder, very important. Cordyceps is probably my favorite mushroom, but reishi is similar. The spleen, we can't really not talk about the blood and not talk about the spleen. Spleen is really important because it's the spleen that removes all the old red and white blood cells. It also has a role in making them. If the spleen isn't working well, then the unhealthy cells stay in circulation. So you'll see the spleen has challenges when there's chronic infections that affect red blood cells. So something like malaria, the spleen is often enlarged. In an infection like Borrelia, which affects red blood cells, or Babesia and Bartonella affect red blood cells, the spleen is often involved because of the increased destruction of red blood cells. And it's really easy to tend to the spleen in herbal medicine. Red root. This plant goes to the spleen and calms it down and cools it off and supports it in doing its work. And this plant I learned about from Michael Moore, Ceananthus americanus. I grow this plant as well. This plant grows all over. It's easy to grow. It's a shrub. Yeah, red root. It's extremely drying. One has to be careful with it in that way. High in flavonoids, so supports blood vessels. It's a beautiful plant, Ceananthus americanus. So assessing the blood, let's talk about that for a minute. So we begin with looking at someone's tongue. And so a pale tongue will suggest that the body's too cold. So you need to warm up the blood, warm up the body. A red tongue suggests that the blood's too hot, so you need to cool off the body, cool off the blood. Again, the flavonoids would be really important. Bitters would be really important here. And then you have just your nice pink tongue. So here you might be using your circulatory stimulants with the pale tongue. You might be using some carminatives, plants high in volatile oils. Yeah. You want to feel your pulses. I know pulses are pretty overwhelming for people to begin practicing, but just feel them. And some questions you can ask is, how is the blood moving through the blood vessels? So you want to think about those different ways the water flows and think, okay, how is the blood moving through here? If it's moving really slowly, is it thick? If it's moving really fast, is it thin? What is the temperature of the blood? Is it hot or cold? And you can kind of get a sense of that when you touch the skin. Like, what's the skin feel like? What's the area over the pulse feel like? And sometimes you can touch a pulse and you can feel the heat in the blood. And then, is the pulse high or low? So a high pulse tends to be more of an acute situation, and a low pulse means that it's more chronic. You're probably looking more at a deficiency with a low pulse. So it's a little more, it's going to take a little longer to bring the balance back into the body. You know, is someone hot or cold? It's a simple question. Are you hot or are you cold? That will tell you a lot about whether the blood is hot or cold. Pain. Pain generally suggests a stagnancy. So pain can be stagnant blood. And wound healing is really important. What is the wound healing like? Like, you know, I've worked with broken bones that aren't healing, and I start moving the blood better. I start resolving the bruising around the break, and all of a sudden the broken bone starts healing. So you move the delivery of blood and the removing of the toxins from the healing process that the body is performing on the bone, and it's amazing what will happen. And my best blood mover ever, and we're going to finish with this amazing plant, is yarrow. Yarrow for stagnant blood, yarrow for old bruises, yarrow for clots. Yarrow moves blood like no other plant. Accompanying it with a circulatory stimulant, and you have a really powerful medicine to help many, many people. I use leaf and flower. I make fresh plant tincture. That's primarily what I use. It's an easy herb to access, and it's a powerful medicine. Get to know your yarrow. Okay, so I feel like this has been a very long video. I hope you were able to stay with me, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I welcome questions, comments, or concerns. There is a chat room for these videos. I will be checking it once a week, so let me know. And if you want to see more videos, go ahead, enjoy them. And I hope your herbal practice is successful.